The wind screamed low through the rusted beams of the Black Hollow mine, whispering the secrets it had kept buried for nearly half a century. Leo Granger adjusted the camera on his helmet, its red light blinking against the cold rock walls, and took another step into the belly of the abandoned beast. He wasn't new to urban exploration, forgotten bunkers, fire-scarred asylums. Even a collapsed railway tunnel or two. He had ventured into the guts of forgotten places for years, but this one felt different. The locals warned him about Black Hollow like it was cursed, and maybe it was the mine had shut down in 1962 after a collapse that killed 6 miners. Or so the story went. No bodies were ever recovered, and no memorial was ever built. Just a quick newspaper headline, a short-lived inquest, and then silence. That silence had been broken only twice, once when a reporter tried to do a piece in the 80s, and mysteriously vanished halfway through his research, and now, as Leo inched deeper into an unmarked shaft, his boots crunching over broken stone and the occasional rusted tool, he followed a sliver of light bouncing from his headlamp, pushing through a narrow corridor that shouldn't have existed. According to the blueprint he had found online, this shaft had collapsed decades ago. But someone recently had cleared a path. Jagged marks scarred the walls, and old support beams were cracked but recently disturbed. What the hell? Leo whispered, lowering his camera to catch the markings. They weren't just scratches. They were delicately long, angry gouges that cut through the rock like something had clawed its way out or in. And then he saw it. A door, not a wooden one, not even steel. It was something else entirely. Rusted iron rods crisscrossed a solid iron slab, sealed into the stone with bolts as thick as his wrist. Someone had made sure this door was never opened again. A faded warning was painted in red. Keep sealed. Danger. 9/11/62. Leo's breath misted as he stepped closer. His fingers hovered over the bolts, their coldness humming with history. One rod had been bent violently like something from the inside had tried to escape. Blood? Maybe. There were brown stains beneath the lower hinge. He turned the camera on himself. Leo Granger, Black Hollow Mine. Found what looks like a sealed chamber, unmarked on all blueprints. Judging by the corrosion, this hasn't been opened in decades. Then, footsteps, not his own. He froze. The sound echoed faintly from behind the door. Once, then again, slow, rhythmic. He leaned in. His ear nearly pressed to the cold metal. A faint scratching. Like nails. Leo stepped back, heart hammering. Nope, he muttered, backing away, camera still recording. Not alone. Something's not right. The silence returned, total, consuming. He stumbled back through the shaft, following the chalk markings he had left on the wall. His pulse slowed only once he emerged into the main tunnel, blinking against the pale morning light bleeding in from the entrance. Later that night, Leo uploaded his footage to a private server. He didn't want to release it publicly yet. Instead, he contacted a man he only knew through an online forum, Deadminer 1972, a supposed ex-engineer who had claimed knowledge of the Black Hollow incident. They spoke via encrypted call. Where exactly was the door? The man asked, voice distorted. Leo gave him the coordinates. Silence on the other end. Then, you weren't supposed to find that shaft. Why? Leo asked. Because the 6 men who went in weren't the only ones? What do you mean? Click. The call dropped. Leo stared at his laptop screen. That last sentence pounding in his head like a second heartbeat. He opened the footage again. Watched the scene in slow motion. As he paused at the frame with the sealed door, he noticed something strange. In the corner, faint, barely visible, a human eye, staring back through a hole in the rusted slab. Leo shut his laptop. The wind outside picked up, rattling the windows of his rented cabin. Miles away, in a dusty attic in town, an old woman opened a box she hadn't touched in 45 years. Inside were 6 helmets, and a 7th one, burned black. She sighed, clutching a yellowed letter addressed to a man who was never found. And beneath the helmets, a torn journal page. He said we'd be rich if we stayed, but the gold wasn't worth what we saw. Eli sealed us in. He said we were changing, that the voices weren't ours anymore. The ink trailed off into a bloody fingerprint dot, and so the silence began to unravel. July 12, 1962, the summer air clung thick with humidity as dawn cracked open over Black Hollow Ridge. The morning whistle pierced the quiet, a signal to the miners that another long day underground was about to begin. Sweat already glazed Eli Cooper's brow as he stood by the entrance to Shaft C, clipboard in hand, watching his crew shuffle in one by one. Eli was 31, sharp-jawed and soft-spoken, with eyes that had seen more of the Earth's guts than any man his age should. He wasn't born into mining, but the Depression had forged him like iron, and mining, he often said, was the only honest work left. But even honesty has cracks. The mine had been humming with unrest for weeks. New investors had taken over Black Hollow Mining Co., pushing for a deeper expansion into what geologists called Zone 5, a region marked in early surveys as unstable. Eli had protested the order in writing. Management had responded by docking his pay. So, he fell in line. But the men didn't trust it. 2 collapses in the last month. 1 injury, 1 close call. Now whispers were spreading through the tunnels, like gas, that someone was tampering with the supports that morning. Eli scanned the shift roster. Crew 4, he called Carter, DeWitt, Rojas McKinney, Lowell, ... and Geller. Marty Geller was the last to show, his face drawn, eyes hollow like he hadn't slept. He nodded at Eli but said nothing. The 6 men gathered their tools and headed for the cage lift. As it lowered into the abyss, Eli caught Marty glancing back briefly, as if saying goodbye. By mid-morning, Eli was in his office, reviewing a report when the first tremor hit. It wasn't loud, just a groan in the earth, like the mine was stretching. A few pebbles rolled off shelves. Then came the call. Collapse in Zone 5. Eli bolted down the access tunnel, boots slamming against the gravel. By the time he reached the site, dust choked the air. The tunnel had caved in completely. A twisted rail of mining track poked through the rubble like a broken bone. Crew 4 was down there. Someone gasped. They dug for 16 hours, found nothing. No voices, no helmets, no blood, just a collapsed wall and silence. The owners called it an unfortunate event. The families called it murder. The mine shut down 3 days later. But Eli stayed. He spent weeks going back in alone, searching through off-map corridors and forgotten shafts. He was convinced of sabotage. There had been too many anomalies. A lantern left burning where no one had been assigned. A severed cable, not listed on inspection forms. And the screams he swore he heard in his dreams, echoing off cold stone. Then, one night, he found a door, sealed, just like Leo would find. 45 years later, Eli stood before it, trembling, his lantern casting dancing shadows across the iron surface. Someone had clawed at it from inside. Bloodstains, deep gouges in the stone. The bolts were new, too new. A voice called out behind him. "You shouldn't be here." Eli turned. Miriam Hensley stood in the tunnel, arms crossed, her face pale beneath her miner's cap. "What did you do?" he asked. "I tried to stop them," she whispered. "But they were changing, Eli. They stayed down too long. They heard something. They were just men. They were something else by the end." Eli never told anyone about that night. He filed a falsified report, claimed the chamber was empty. He disappeared from the public eye months later, listed in the company's records as resigned due to health issues. But Miriam knew better. He'd cracked, and Black Hollow was left to rot. In 2007. Leo Granger's discovery would pull the thread, back in the present. Leo clicked through old documents on microfilm at the county library. The headlines were sparse. 6 miners lost in collapse. Bode unrecovered. Investigation closed due to lack of evidence. Mine deemed financial liability. But one photo made him stop. A company group shot, dated June 1962. 6 of the men he had seen listed in the shaft log: Carter, DeWitt, Geller, Rojas, McKinney, Lowell, and just behind them, Eli Cooper, his eyes not looking at the camera, but at something in the mind behind them. Leo zoomed in. Blurry, grainy, but unmistakable. The sealed door, half covered in shadow, barely visible. It was already there. He stared at the screen, heart in his throat. The next stop was clear. He had to find Miriam Hensley. The rain came down in sheets as Leo pulled into the gravel driveway of a small, weather-worn house nestled on the edge of Black Hollow Township, the kind of place that seemed to sag under the weight of memory. An old screen door creaked open before he even knocked. Nora Bell stood in the doorway. A thin woman with a spine like steel and sorrow etched into every crease of her face. She looked like she hadn't smiled in years, and Leo didn't expect her to start now. "You're the one who found the door," she said without greeting. Leo nodded. "I saw your name in the archives. Your husband Frank Bell was part of Crew 4. She stepped aside. "Then come in. But I won't be offering you coffee." Inside, the air smelled faintly of lavender and mothballs. Framed photos lined the mantel. Frank in his miner's helmet. A wedding picture yellowed with age, and one photo Nora had turned face down. Leo didn't ask why. They sat at a round oak table. In the kitchen, Nora placed a box between them. "I told the company I burned all this," she said, "but I didn't." Inside were old shift reports, faded ID badges, and at the bottom, a leather-bound journal. Frank's name embossed in the corner. Leo opened it. The first pages were dull. Hours worked, temperature readings, boring minutiae. Then, about 3 weeks before the collapse, the handwriting changed. July 2nd, something's wrong in Zone 5. I keep hearing voices, but the others don't want to talk about it. Carter says it's just the wind. He's lying. They all hear it. July 5th found a tunnel that wasn't on any map. Rojas called it the gallery. The walls are different, smoother, darker, like they weren't carved by us. July 8th, Geller says he saw someone down there, but when we checked, there was no one. McKinney's nose won't stop bleeding. Leo looked up, heart pounding. Why did he keep going back? Nora didn't answer immediately. She walked to a drawer and pulled out an envelope, brittle, unopened. He was scared, but they made him sign this. Leo turned it over. The seal bore the mining company's insignia. Inside, a typed non-disclosure contract. No mention of danger, just vague references to confidential development work in geologically sensitive regions. And then, in pen, signed under protest. Frank Bell, the 9th of July 62, underneath that, barely legible, a scrawled sentence. We were warned. But the gold wasn't real. The voices are. Leo sat back. He knew something. They all did, Nora said quietly, and they couldn't leave. Her voice, cracked not with drama, but the kind of sorrow that had calcified over decades. He started writing letters he never mailed. Said there were things under the mine, shapes, not people. Things that spoke like people. Leo flipped deeper into the journal. The final entry stopped him cold. Eli told us not to follow. He said the door wasn't made to keep things out. It was made to keep us in. I think he knew. I think he made a deal, a contract none of us signed. We're not alone down here. Leo looked up. Why keep all this hidden? Because they came to my door after the mine shut. A man in a grey coat said if I talked, I'd end up with the others. I never saw Eli again. I assumed he was part of it. But now, I think. He tried to stop it. Nora opened another envelope, a photo, black and white, 6 men standing outside the shaft, Frank among them. And behind them, barely visible, a shadow. You see it too, she whispered. Leo nodded slowly. It wasn't a trick of the light. Do not go back there, she said. I don't care what you think you'll find. That door was sealed. For a reason, Leo pocketed a copy of the journal. I have to know. Then you better hope it doesn't remember you. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the wind had changed. Leo stood beside his car, staring back at the house. The curtains didn't move. Nora was done talking. He drove back toward his motel. The pages of Frank's journal echoing in his mind. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept dreaming of tunnels, endless coiling paths lit by flickering lanterns, and a voice logo, his name, over and over. At dawn, Leo printed a photo of the shadowed figure behind Crew 4. On the back, he wrote a single name. Miriam H. The path, back to Black Hollow Mine, was narrower, this time not in width, but in feeling. The earth itself seemed to breathe slower, like it sensed what Leo had come to do. He drove in silence, the journal in the passenger seat, and the photo of Crew folded in his coat pocket. This time, he wasn't alone. He'd convinced a documentary team from a fringe YouTube channel, people who thrived on conspiracies and viral danger, to join him. It was a reckless move, but after Nora's warning and Frank's journal, Leo knew he couldn't go alone. There needed to be witnesses, just in case. The crewtess, the skeptical camerawoman, Darren, the sound guy with nerves of glass, and a bulky extra guy named Max, ate up near the shaft entrance as Leo led them down the corridor where the sealed door had waited for 45 years. Only this time, it looked older, sicker. The red warning was nearly gone. The iron rods were dull with age, and one had fallen off completely. "We're cutting through that?" Mac asked, blinking. "Yes," Leo said. "But carefully, I want to document everything." It took 3 hours. Sparks rained as Mac used a portable grinder to slice through the last bolts. The metal screamed like something alive. Then the final rod dropped with a heavy clank, and silence fell. Leo stepped forward and pushed. The door gave way. A breath of air, stale and impossibly cold, spilled out. Tess gagged. Darren muttered something under his breath. They entered, one by one. Cameras rolling. The room inside was octagonal, with rough, uneven walls that looked like they'd been melted into shape instead of carved. Black scorch marks ran in strange patterns. In the center lay 6 rusted helmets, carefully arranged in a circle. Beneath them, dust, no bones, no body, just helmets. But there was a 7th thing. Against the far wall, just behind the door, sat a skeleton leg splayed, one arm reaching out toward the entrance. The bones were dry but intact, like the body had been preserved unnaturally. In its other hand, still curled tight by shriveled tendon, was a metal case. Leo knelt beside it, gently prying the fingers open. Inside the case was a single 16mm camera reel. No label, no casing, just the film. Tess zoomed in. "That shouldn't be here." Leo stood slowly, the reel clutched tight. "Someone wanted us to find this." Darren, pale and jittery, stepped back toward the corridor. "I don't like this. There's something." He froze. From deeper in the chamber, behind a jagged crack in the far wall, came a sound, faint, wet, like something breathing through mud. Mac gripped the crowbar tighter. "We're not alone." The sound stopped. Leo gave the signal. They backed out fast, dragging their gear with them. No one spoke until they were above ground again, and even then, no one had words. That night, in Leo's motel room, they set up a projector. The reel stuttered to life on the wall. Grainy black and white footage flickered 6 men laughing in the tunnel. Frank Bell waved at the camera. Marty Geller held up a pickaxe. Behind them, nothing. Then, the footage jumped. The camera now shook. The tunnel lights flickered. Geller screamed something, pointing off-frame. Carter shoved someone. Blood hit the lens. The footage snapped to black, then came back. A final scene. One man, alone, holding the camera, his face gaunt, barely recognizable. Marty Geller. He stared into the lens. They're gone, not dead. Gone. The room, ... It isn't in time. I stayed. I thought I could outlast it, but I'm not me anymore. If you see this, don't open it. Static. Tess covered her mouth. Leo sat frozen. One of them survived. He was the skeleton. "No," Darren said quietly. "Geller filmed it." But the voice ... at the end. That wasn't Geller. They rewound it, slowed the tape, and beneath Geller's words, another voice. A whisper, it said Leo's name. He turned off the projector. "What now?" Tess asked. Leo stared at the reel. We find the others. We find out what happened in that room. Outside, the wind howled again. But this time, it carried something else. A low, distant knocking. From underground. Leo couldn't sleep. After watching the reel, every breath felt borrowed. He replayed the final frame in his mind. Marty Geller, gaunt and frantic, whispering warnings to an unseen audience, a voice not his echoing behind him. But it wasn't just fear gnawing at Leo's gut. It was the last thing Darren had said. That voice knew your name. Morning came heavy. The motel curtains barely let in the grey light as Leo made calls first to a sound editor in Chicago he'd worked with years ago. Then to a paranormal archivist. Known for decoding infected tapes, by mid-afternoon, Leo and Tess sat in the back room of a dusty AV restoration shop in Ashland. The place smelled like melted plastic and old vinyl. The expert, a wiry man with nicotine-stained fingers, and a t-shirt that said analog or die, spooled the reel onto a high-end scanner. I'll isolate all the audio layers, he said. We'll hear what the naked ear can't. They waited in silence as the reel digitized. Tess scrolled through notes. Leo stared at the waveform forming on the monitor. Here, Rick said, pointing. This spike, it's underneath the main dialogue. He boosted the layer. The speakers filled with static. Then we shouldn't have listened to him, someone screamed. More static, then another voice, low and calm. Seal it now, before it's too late. Rick scrubbed it back. That voice, it repeats. Same inflection, same tone, 5 seconds later, but lower. Like an echo that's not an echo. Leo leaned in. Can you isolate just that one? Rick worked for 15 minutes, tweaking filters. Finally, he played it. The voice was clearer this time. Deeper, slow, deliberate. This is Cooper. Seal the chamber. No one leaves. Leo froze. Play that again. Rick did. Tess looked at Leo. Cooper, as in Eli Cooper. Leo nodded slowly. He wasn't supposed to be down there. Every record said he was topside. Maybe he lied. Rick offered. No, Leo said. Or someone else did. Tess scanned her phone. I found a report. Internal company memo, dated July 10, 1962, says Eli was reassigned that day to above-ground logistics. Which means he could have gone in without it being recorded, Leo finished. Especially if he was hiding something. Rick played another clip, fast-forwarded past the initial screams. Then a new sound emerged, rhythmic tapping. Like code.morse. Rick translated it, SEV in 7. Tess asked. There were 6 minors, Leo muttered. But Geller filmed the tape, and died in the room. That's 7. But who was the 7th? Tess stared at him. You think Cooper went in and never came back out? No, Leo said. I think he came back, but not alone. They left the shop shaken. Copies of the digitized reel burned to encrypted drives. Leo sat in the car, watching the clouds churn overhead like bruises in the sky. Tess leaned against the hood. So what now? I need answers, Leo said. We need someone who knew Eli. Someone still alive. Tess raised an eyebrow. You think there is? Leo opened his notebook, flipping to a page he'd marked with red tape. A name from an old personnel file. Miriam Hensley, geologist. Present during the final days of Black Hollow. He pointed at the name. She was there. She knew Eli. She knew what they were digging for. Tess stared at it, then back at Leo. You think she'll talk? I think if she's still breathing, she won't have a choice. That night, Leo returned to his cabin and locked the doors. He played the reel again, slower this time, frame by frame. He paused at a flicker the moment the lights fail and Geller screams. There, between frames 412 and 413, something moved in the corner. Not a person, something taller, thinner. Watching Leo leaned in closer. Its shape was blurred, but its eyes weren't. 2 dots, reflective, fixed on Geller like a predator. He slammed the laptop shut. The cabin walls creaked. Then the lights flickered. Knock. Once, twice, Leo didn't move. The knocks stopped, and from outside, a voice not loud, not shouting, just present. "This is Cooper. Seal the chamber. No one leaves." Leo's blood turned to ice. He waited until morning. Then he packed a bag and circled a new destination on his map, a retirement home outside Evansville. Miriam Hensley, COS, she was next. The old mining company's archive building sat on the edge of a forgotten industrial park, shrouded in layers of grime and disuse. Leo stepped inside with the weight of the film reel, the voice of Eli Cooper echoing in his ears like a ghost refusing to fade. Boxes lined the shelves. Like coffins, thousands of forgotten files, shift logs, expense reports, and incident memos, some dating back to the 1930s. With Tess's help, Leo narrowed the search to 1962. Focusing on internal communications leading up to the collapse, it took 6 hours before he found it, a manila folder. Stamped internal security violation, priority in bold red ink. Inside, a typed report dated June 19, 1962, nearly 3 weeks before the mine closed. Leo sat down. Heart pounding. 2. R. Hensley Operations Oversight Subject. Activity Concern. E. Cooper. Repeated breaches in protocol. Observed unauthorized descent into restricted tunnels during off-the-wires. Behavior erratic. Refuses to report findings from Site Delta. Shows signs of mental agitation and paranoia. Mentions external auditory input and structural anomalies not consistent with known geology. The final line was underlined by hand. Recommend psychiatric evaluation or full security lockdown before escalation. Leo flipped the page. Attached was a grainy photo of Eli Cooper, looking disheveled, face pale, eyes wide. It was stamped confidential. "What were you doing down there, Eli?" Leo muttered. Tess leaned over his shoulder. "Wait. Look at the signature, a Hensley. Related to Miriam, has to be. Same surname. Could be her father or brother." The family had oversight on geological studies. Leo tucked the file into his bag. The next day, they drove 2 hours to Ridgevale Home, a modest facility nestled in rolling hills. Leo had tracked down a name buried in a class action suit from the 1970s. Thomas Greaves. Former Black Hollow site manager, now 91 and fading fast. A nurse let them in with a shrug. "Mr. Greaves doesn't say much anymore, but sometimes he remembers." They found him by a window, hands shaking slightly, eyes clouded but alert. Leo approached slowly. "Mr. Greaves, I'm Leo. I came to ask you about Black Hollow." Greaves didn't respond until Leo showed him the photos of Eli Cooper. Then, Greaves whispered, "Too deep." Leo knelt beside him. "What did Eli do?" "He let them listen," Greaves murmured. "Said the rock could talk. Said it was older than bones. He heard it calling." Tess frowned. "Who funded the expansion?" Greaves's eyes flicked up. "Not the company. Government contract. Psychological trials. Isolation response under pressure. Wanted to see what broke first, body or mind." Leo sat back. "They used the mine for human experiments." Greaves nodded. Miriam knew. She fought it, but Eli, he stayed down too long. "What did he find?" The old man shook a door, but it wasn't made by men. Later, back at the motel, Leo flipped through Frank Bell's journal again. This time, things made more sense. July 3rd. Cooper's eyes look wrong. "He doesn't blink anymore. Said we'd ascend beneath the ground. I think he's hearing voices, none of us can." July 7th. "We saw shadows today, not men. They moved wrong. Like they didn't care about the walls." July 10th. "Cooper stopped talking, he just watches." Now. Leo looked up at Tess. They weren't digging for minerals. They were digging for ... contact. Tess paled. "But why cover it up?" "Because it went wrong. Whatever they found or awakened wasn't human, and Eli, he brought it back." They sat in silence, the motel room suddenly colder. Leo's phone buzzed. "Unknown number," he answered. A woman's voice, dry and measured. "Mr. Granger, this is Miriam Hensley. I believe you're looking for me." Leo blinked. Yes, I am. I won't talk over the phone. Meet me tomorrow. I'll send coordinates. Come alone. Click. Leo stared at the screen. Tess raised an eyebrow. Was that Miriam? He said. She's alive, and she wants to meet. Where? Leo held up his phone. Near the mine. The sun was barely up when Leo left the motel alone. Driving along the broken back roads that led to the coordinates Miriam Hensley had sent, the air was thick with mist, the sky still a pale bruise overhead. No cars, no birdsong, just the soft growl of tires on gravel. She had chosen a remote, long-abandoned ranger's cabin on the edge of the black hollow forest neutral ground, far from town, far from the mine. Leo parked, heart knocking, then stepped out with Frank. Belle's journal in hand, she was already waiting. Miriam Hensley stood tall despite her years. Her silver hair tied back in a neat bun, eyes sharp and watchful. She looked nothing like the frightened technician Leo had expected. She looked like someone who had learned how to carry her secrets without letting them crush her. You came, she said, her voice dry as the wind. Leo nodded. You were in the photo with Crew 4, but no public record shows you were ever at Black Hollow. No public record ever would, she replied. I was sent in under a contract with the Department of Behavioral Studies. That photo should never have existed. Why? Miriam didn't answer at first. Instead, she unlocked the cabin door and stepped inside. Leo followed. The interior was sparse bare wood floors, a table, 2 chairs, and a small stack of old files wrapped in twine. She sat, motioned for him to do the same, then pushed a yellowed document toward him. Officially, I was hired as a geologist. Unofficially, I was monitoring the effects of prolonged sensory deprivation on isolated workers. The mine was ideal deep, cold, cut off. The deeper they went, the more we observed. Strange dreams, hallucinations, paranoia. Leo flipped open the file. It was stamped Project Echo Chamber. The miners weren't told, she said. The company got their consent buried in routine contracts. But after a month of deep shaft operations, something changed. Their reports stopped matching physical data. They started describing corridors that didn't exist. Leo swallowed, and Eli, Miriam nodded. He was the control subject. He volunteered. Thought it would make him a better leader. For a while, he seemed immune. But then he stopped reporting, started going down alone, hours at a time. What did he find? She looked at him, then down. We don't know. He came back, different, quieter, his journals rants, riddles, symbols we couldn't translate. He stopped using past tense. Started saying things like we are becoming and the walls remember. Leo opened Frank's journal beside her file. Cooper doesn't blink anymore. He said the door wasn't to keep them out, it was to keep us in. Miriam flinched slightly at the quote. He came to me the day before the collapse. Said something was coming. Said we had to seal the lowest shaft permanently. I asked what he'd seen. He only said, it's older than language. Did you see it? Leo asked. She looked at him then directly, painfully. Only once. It wasn't a shape, it was a presence, like a second heartbeat under your skin. It made the walls breathe, made you forget who you were. I ran, and after they wanted to release a statement. Gas hallucinations. Structural fault, but I threatened to leak the files. Leo raised a brow. So you blackmailed them? No, her jaw tightened. Eli blackmailed me. He said if I talked, the presence would follow. That it remembered voices. Leo's blood ran cold. Voices. She nodded slowly. I didn't believe him until I started dreaming in other people's voices. They sat in silence for a moment. Leo leaned forward. Did Eli survive? Miriam hesitated, then reached into her coat. She pulled out a photograph grainy, taken in 1973, almost a decade. After the collapse, a man in shadow walking away from a burned-down house. He showed up in Nebraska, she said. Name changed, face aged, but the walk, the stare, it was him, she sighed. That man was found dead weeks later, locked inside a shipping container. No wounds, just ... drained, like something hollowed him out. Leo stared at the photo. So the presence didn't stay underground. No, she said. It found a way out. Through him. Outside, the wind picked up. The trees shifted like they were listening. Miriam slid the file toward him. Take this, but don't go back there. Whatever it is, it feeds on curiosity. On attention. That's why it let Geller live long enough to film the reel. Leo stood slowly, eyes on the files. Thank you. As he turned to leave, Miriam said one last thing. I saw your footage. The frame with the eye through the door. That wasn't a minor. Leo froze. She leaned in, voice barely audible. It was watching you. The results came in 3 days. Later, Leo sat alone in the sterile hallway of the county forensics lab, staring at a manila envelope as if it might open itself. Tess paced behind him, her boots echoing in the silence. Just open it, she finally muttered. Leo exhaled, cracked the seal, and unfolded the sheet inside. DNA analysis inconclusive. No match found within official personnel or national registries. Not one of the 6 minors. He looked up. It's not Frank, not Carter, not Rojas, Geller, McKinney, or Darby. Tess blinked. Then, who the hell is it? Leo leaned back. A 7th man. One not in the records. One who shouldn't have been there. She sat beside him, stunned. We watched 6 helmets in the chamber. 6 miners went down. But the skeleton ... 7 went in, Leo said. Only one died at the door. Or maybe he tried to escape. Later that evening, they rewatched the reel. Leo had it digitized, frame by frame, slowing the chaos until it moved like sludge. There, at the 42-minute mark, just as Geller turned the lens toward a collapsing tunnel, a single badge flashed on a torn uniform. Leo froze the frame. M. Geller 312-8. Gasped, but that can't be right. Marty Geller was on assignment overseas. That's why he wasn't listed among the dead. Leo frowned. According to who? They pulled up the mining company's records again. Geller's name was absent from every log of crew for that day. No shift entry, no pay stub, no mention. Yet there he was, bleeding on camera. He was there, Leo said. They erased him. Tess scanned the company archives, cross-checking employment histories. Wait, she said. There's a 2-month gap in Geller's file. June to August 62. Says he was off-site consulting. No location listed. Leo ran a hand through his hair. That's when the experiment happened. That's when Eerily lost control. But why cover up Geller? Leo stared at the badge. Because he survived long enough to document it, he became a liability. Tess turned. You think the skeleton is Geller? Maybe. But then why doesn't the DNA match? Silence. Then Leo said what neither of them wanted to voice. What if it was Geller? But not as himself anymore. Tess paled. You mean something else used him? Leo nodded. Like Miriam said, it didn't follow Eerily, it followed a voice, a person. Geller filmed it. And, whatever it was, ... it learned him. They both sat. In silence, the low hum of the laptop, the only sound. Tess finally whispered, There's one way to know. His daughter. She's alive. I found a mention of her last known address, Michigan. Leo blinked. You'd think she'd give us a DNA sample? If she believes he never came home, Tess said. If she still wonders. The next day, they drove north. 4 hours through pine and fog, until they reached a modest house with wind chimes and a rusting mailbox. The name on it, Geller, the woman who answered, was in her 50s. Grey in her hair, deep-set eyes that looked like they'd read every terrible answer before the question had even been asked. Are you here about my father? She asked. Before they could speak. Leo nodded. We think he was at Black Hollow. In 1962, she opened the door wider. Come in, I've been waiting. Inside, she pulled a wooden box from beneath a cabinet. He used to send us postcards, always from different countries. Brazil, Spain, Japan, but they weren't real. No return addresses, no phone numbers, just ... a message. She handed one. To Leo, it was dated August 14, 1962. The tunnels go deeper than the mine. I heard them in my sleep. I'm trying to stay myself, but it's hard. I think they know I don't belong to them. Leo swallowed. Did he come back? She shook her head. Not really. A man came to the door once, looked like him, smiled like him, but he didn't remember my name. He kept calling me Nora. That was my mother. Tess frowned. You never saw him again. One day, he just disappeared. We buried an empty casket. My mother called it closure. I called it a lie. Leo hesitated. Would you give us a DNA sample? We found ... remains, possibly him. She stared at them a long time. Then, without a word, nodded back at the motel. Leo sent the swab to the lab with overnight rush. He barely slept at 3:14 a.m. His phone buzzed. The result, match confirmed. The skeleton was Marty Geller. And yet ... he had never officially been in the mine. His body had no wounds, no trauma. But every nerve in his brainstem showed signs of extreme, sustained electrical stimulation, like he'd been broadcasting something, or receiving. Leo stared at the ceiling. Geller had walked into the mine, human, but something else walked out. The drive to Shady Pines care home was long and heavy with silence. David Cooper had changed his name, moved states, and never gave interviews. It had taken Leo weeks to track him down. But after the DNA results, after the postcards, and after Miriam's warning it was time, David was in his early 60s now. Lean with tired eyes and the kind of wariness you'd expect from someone who spent his life pretending he didn't share a name with a ghost. He agreed to meet reluctantly in the garden behind the care home. It was mid-autumn leaves scattered like forgotten pages. I don't talk about him, David said, folding his arms. Haven't in years. Leo nodded. I get it, but you should know we found a body in the mine, and a tape. He's on it, he said. Things we can't explain. David's expression changed. I know, he said quietly. Because I heard it too. Tess looked at Leo, then back to David. You mean the tape? No, David whispered. I mean his confession. The one they buried. He reached into his coat and pulled out a sealed letter, yellowed and brittle. He gave me this the night before he died, said if anyone ever came looking for the truth, I was to hand this over. But only if I believed they could handle it. Leo opened the letter carefully. Inside, a single page. Eli's handwriting was sharp, almost frantic. They weren't mine anymore. They spoke in unison. They dreamed while awake. I sealed the room to protect the surface. I couldn't kill them, but I couldn't let them leave. If you hear the voices run, don't. Trust the ones who walk out whole. David looked down at his hands. He would scream in his sleep. Beg for forgiveness. Not for what he did, but for what he brought back. Tess asked, what do you think he meant? Don't trust the ones who walk out whole. David shook his head. He believed something got into them. Something that mimicked being human. Like a mold taking shape. He said it wasn't just physical, it was in their minds. Feeding on fear. Living off memory. Said it wore their thoughts like old clothes. Leo felt the words like static against his skin, so he trapped them. All of them. David nodded. Even Geller. He came to the house once. My dad slammed the door in his face. Said it wasn't really him. That something else had learned how to walk in his skin. Tess stepped forward. Did Eli ever say what he found down there? David hesitated. He said it was a room that had no end, that sound bent in it. Time folded, he said, the walls whispered in languages no one taught him. And that the closer you got to the center, the less you remembered who you were. Leo asked, do you believe him? David didn't. Answer right away. Then, finally, I think he was telling the truth, and I think it cost him everything. They left the home in silence, the wind curling dead leaves along the walkway. Later that night, Leo reviewed the confession again. Don't trust the ones who walk out whole. He thought of Geller, of the eye in the footage, of the presence Miriam said was still watching. Then, his phone rang. It was Rick. The audio tech from Ashland. I need you to come back, Rick said. Now. There's something on the reel I didn't catch before. Leo frowned. What is it? I isolated a background frequency behind the tape distortion. It's not static, it's rhythmic. Repeating. What does it say? A pause. Rick's voice was shaken. It's not in English, but it's layered under every scream, every voice, like it's bleeding through. Leo rubbed his temples. Send me the file. I already did, Rick said, but I need to warn you. The last time I listened to it, truly listened, I blacked out. Woke up 2 hours later on the floor. Door wide open. Laptop fried. Leo froze. You think it's a signal? I think it's an invitation. As Leo ended the call, a new email pinged. The audio file. He hovered over the play button. Outside, something knocked one soft. Deliberate on the motel window. Leo didn't turn to look. The knock on the window never came again. When Leo finally opened the curtain, the parking lot was empty. But something lingered in the air like heat without a source, a silence too thick to be natural. He packed at dawn. He didn't tell Tess. He left a note on the pillow, just for words. I have to know. By mid-morning, he stood again at the mouth of Black Hollow Mine. The fencing had been cut. The warning signs torn down, as if someone or something wanted him to return. He strapped on the harness, flashlight clipped tight, recorder tucked in his chest pocket. And then, without hesitation, he descended. The mine greeted him like a memory. The tunnel narrowed in stages, walls dripping with condensation. He passed the old tool carts, the shattered helmet, the scorched footprints from the chamber. As he reached the sealed door, the one he and his crew had pried open weeks before, he paused, but this time, he kept walking. Past the chamber, deeper, unmapped territory now. The tunnel curved unexpectedly, into a passage barely taller than his shoulders. The air changed hairdryer, thicker. His breath echoed. He turned a corner, and there it was, another chamber. Not carved by tools. Not registered on any map. The walls weren't stone, they shimmered faintly, like metal underwater, etched with scratches. Dozens, hundreds. He stepped inside. At the center sat a rusted cot. Empty food tins, a broken radio. A journal turned to its final page. And on every surface walls, bed frame, even the ceiling names, scratched in fingernails, nails, tools. Some recent, some decades old. Leo stepped closer. Frank Belcarter Holmes Ellie, Cooper M. Galileo, Granger, his own name, carved over and over again. Dozens of times, he staggered back. The lights flickered, once, twice. Then the recorder clicked on by itself, static. Then a voice vent, low, inhumanly calm. Welcome back. Leo's skin crawled. He turned in a slow circle. No one there. Another flicker, and then the walls began to hum. He grabbed the journal, flipped through line after line of looping words. We dream awake. We speak as many. The door remembers the hand that closed it. They don't die, they echo. Leo comes, he always does. He dropped the book. Another voice. This one closer, familiar. Leo. He spun. A figure stood at the far end of the chamber, thin, pale, face obscured by shadow, not breathing. Geller, Leo whispered. The figure tilted its head. We used him, he broke. But you. You're stronger. Leo backed toward the tunnel. What are you? It stepped forward. We are the memory that fed the mine. The thought behind the eyes. We do not take. We become. The lights surged, then died. Darkness swallowed everything in that void. Leo saw flashes, visions like the tape reel had invaded his mind. The miners screaming. Eli sealing the door. Geller's final breath. Miriam's eyes. David's silence. The moment Leo first opened the chamber, and then his own face. But not now, younger, 8 years old. On a school trip. Black Hollow. He had been here before. He had looked into the tunnel, and something had looked back. The memory slammed into him like a train. He'd drawn it, as a child, a figure in the dark, a voice in his dreams. He hadn't discovered Black Hollow. It had been waiting for him. The lights flared back on. The figure was gone, but Leo's name now glowed faintly across the walls. Hundreds of times. He was never just an explorer, never just curious. He was the final entry in a story that had never stopped writing itself. The video Leo captured in the mine was meant to be private, but in a moment of blurred exhaustion and something like compulsion, he uploaded it. No title, no hashtags, just raw footage, 37 minutes of dark descent, whispered words, and the flicker of something that should not have shaped it went viral in under 12 hours. At first, it was typical internet reaction: curiosity, fascination, endless comments about how terrifying and fake it must be. Then came something stranger. People started claiming the video knew them. They said the whispers in the background called them by name. Some viewers reported headaches, nausea, dreams they didn't recognize as their own, messages etched in condensation. On mirrors, one man emailed Leo a screenshot, just black static, and wrote, "It said I was next." And then Nora Bell was found dead. Her body was discovered in her small home, radio static still playing in the background. No signs of trauma, no sign of forced entry, but her face was frozen in terror. Tess called Leo that night. "She's gone. They said she died of natural causes, but I saw her. It looked like she'd seen hell before she passed," Leo said. Nothing. He was listening to the audio again. But not with ears, with instinct. Somewhere in the mix, something was layered beneath the surface, a frequency that felt like memory. Hours later. Another headline. Miriam Hensley, Mrs. Cyangy, her home left unlocked, her research scattered across the floor. A single phrase scratched into the bedroom wall. "It walks now." Tess whispered over the phone. "Leo. This isn't just your story anymore. You let it out." He knew, he could feel it. More messages, more voices. People online began pointing out anomalies in the footage, things Leo had never seen. A pair of eyes watching from a shaft wall. A second shadow behind him in scenes where he'd been alone. A voice whispering, "Don't leave me," layered over the last minute. Even Tess admitted she saw something new each time she watched it. Then, a podcaster named Jules McKinney decided to investigate. He documented everything. Posted daily updates. "This thing is real," he said in his final video. "I can't sleep. I can't stop hearing them. I dream in tunnels now." 2 days later, he vanished. His last recorded audio was a single breath and one whisper, "I'm not me anymore." The footage kept spreading. But the story wasn't just online anymore. People across the country began reporting Black Hollow-related sightings. A man seen walking barefoot across a frozen lake. A woman at a gas station humming the mine's elevator tones. A child drawing diagrams of shafts that had never been disclosed. The footage, it seemed, was contagious, and through it all, Leo stopped sleeping. He heard voices through the speakers, even when the video was off. He smelled iron in his sheets, found dust on his windowsill shaped like letters. One morning, he woke up with dirt under his fingernails and a name scratched into his arm. Eerily. He didn't remember doing it, but he remembered. Why? It was never about uncovering truth, it was about becoming part of it. The footage didn't show everything. There had been one more tunnel. One last descent he hadn't dared enter until now. He packed the recorder, left a single message with Tess. "If I don't come back, burn it." The government sealed Black Hollow Mine within days of Leo's final descent. They cited structural instability, seismic threats, and radiation anomalies, words that sounded clinical enough to bury a story. Armed personnel stood watch for weeks. But the locals knew better. At night, they said, you could still hear the knocks, not echoes, not shifts of rock. Rhythmic, deliberate, knocks 3 at a time, then silence. Then again, as if something below was counting. Tess stopped answering calls. The last message she left Leo was a voicemail that played only static, and the sound of someone quietly breathing. David Cooper sat alone in a dim library, surrounded by boxes of notes, footage, audio files, and his father's journal. The manuscript he had promised himself he would never write now took shape before him. The Mine Remembers, that was the title. The story wasn't just Leo's, it was Eerie's, Miriam's, Nora's, Jella's. Everyone who touched that place left a piece of themselves behind, and the mine, it never gave those pieces back. David's fingers hovered over the final page. His publisher had asked for a hopeful ending. Some sense of closure, he wrote. Sometimes history echoes, sometimes it screams, and sometimes it waits, patient and hungry, beneath our feet. Leo went looking for truth. What he found was far older and far more awake than any of us were prepared for. He signed the page. Then, something tugged at him. A sound. From the hallway, from the floorboards. Knocks. 3. Pause. 3 more. He turned slowly. Nothing. He shut the manuscript. But he couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was reading it over his shoulder. He reached for the pen again. On the back of the final page, he scrawled 6 words. It's not over. It never was. The room grew cold, and then a voice, not his father's. Not Leo's, but one he had heard once, long ago. In a memory that wasn't his, whispered from the dark, "We remember you too." Outside, wind pushed through the empty shaft vents at the edge of town. It wasn't just air, it was breath. The mine hadn't been sealed. Not really. It was waiting, still counting, still listening.